Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. Our cover story tonight is about a growing friendship that has left America rattled. Earlier in the evening, Chinese President Xi Jinping landed in Saudi Arabia. It's a historic visit that is significant for more reasons than one. And watching this visit very closely will be the United States of America. After all, America's oldest oil ally is slipping into Chinese embrace. The US-Saudi relationship has already been under strain. Joe Biden needs the support of the Saudi regime to keep the oil prices in check. Tonight on Gravitas, we discuss, is America losing the oil war? Is American oil diplomacy falling apart? How will Joe Biden win the oil war without MBS? And what does the China-Saudi Arabia relationship and the shift in balance mean for the United States? Where does it leave America? Is this the beginning of a new anti-America alliance? And while Xi Jinping gets that red carpet welcome in Saudi Arabia, we tell you how Joe Biden has been trying to woo the Saudi regime by granting immunity to the Saudi Crown Prince in the Jamal Khashoggi case. As the Iran unrest continues, Ayatollah Khamenei makes more pledges to try and appease the protesters on the ground. We get you the latest. Uber has been fined by an Australian court for misleading consumers by threatening cancellation fees it never charged and overstating fare estimates on some rides. Why do we catch a cold during winters? We may have just found an answer to that age-old question thanks to a study. Xi Jinping made history today. The Chinese president landed in Riyadh. A red carpet awaited him. A historic Arab-China summit is to take place. And as the cameras of the world zoomed into Saudi Arabia, it was the United States that was watching most closely, with worry, with fear. America was watching its oil diplomacy fall apart. Let's first play out for you the visuals of Xi Jinping's arrival. Have a look at the grand welcome that the Chinese leader received there. What you are really seeing is American oil diplomacy falling apart. What you are seeing is America losing the oil war, one that has been triggered by the war in Ukraine, and one that the US had dreamt of winning through Saudi Arabia's support. But America's oldest oil ally is slipping into China's embrace. It is switching sides. And this tectonic shift is being led by Xi Jinping's historic outreach. Saudi Arabia is only the third country that the Chinese president is visiting since the pandemic started. Kazakhstan was the first, Uzbekistan the second. But that was different. Samarkand, remember, was hosting the Shanghai Cooperation Summit, or the SCO, an organization China founded in 1996. It's almost sentimental. With Saudi Arabia, China's ties are lubricated by oil. 17% of China's oil comes from Saudi Arabia. That's more oil than China imports from any other country. But that's all that there is to the Saudi-China relationship. There are no joint counter-terrorism efforts or strategic partnership. But what there is now is a common enemy, the United States of America, that unites these otherwise distant countries. China and the US have kept no secret of their growing animosity. Washington is openly supporting Taiwan, exposing China's nuclear plans. And China, on the other hand, is openly name-calling the United States. The biggest troublemaker being the latest. The relationship between Saudi Arabia and the US also has been falling apart under the Biden administration. The very oil that powered their relationship has now started driving a rift between the two sides. The US wants Saudi-led oil cartel OPEC to produce more oil. Riyadh does not agree to that. In October itself, the OPEC Plus decided to cut oil production. And what followed was a spat between Saudi Arabia and the US officials, and Biden calling the cut unnecessary. So that is the backdrop against which Saudi Arabia and China are coming closer. And it's bound to shake the foundation of the Saudi-US relationship. Also have implications for America's oil politics. You see, America has been going about town asking countries to stop buying Russian oil. Washington says Russia is funding its war by selling oil. America wants to block Russia's oil trade, be it through sanctions, pricing policies, or plain politics. But America will not get what it wants till the Saudi-led OPEC produces more oil, till Saudi Arabia cooperates with America. What's happening is a far cry. Saudi Arabia is switching sides, joining hands with China, a country that's on Russia's side and against the United States. America's oldest oil ally is slipping away from its embrace. This is as embarrassing as it gets for Joe Biden. And to understand that, let's look at what this shift in balance means for China, Saudi Arabia, and America. Let's start with China. The visit showcases China's growing clout in West Asia. Also, it gets to rub this closeness on America's face. America is supposed to be Saudi Arabia's biggest security guarantor. What is a country that America brands a security threat doing in a kingdom that was once called America's 51st state? This is a question the American President Joe Biden would hate answering, and China would rejoice at that sight. And what's in it for Saudi Arabia? Xi Jinping's visit, I should remind you, comes following an invitation from Saudi Arabia's King Salman. Basically, it is the Saudis who laid the path for this visit. And why is that? Because Xi Jinping's visit is a chance for Riyadh to deepen its partnership with the Chinese at a time when the kingdom is trying to diversify its economy and diplomacy. This is also a country that's trying to modernize itself. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is obsessed about projecting an image of a modern Saudi Arabia. And this is where China comes in with its technology. China, in fact, is already building mega projects in Saudi Arabia, setting up 5G infrastructure. You see, between the Saudis and the Chinese, it is an energy for technology or energy for trade kind of relationship. It's very different from the terms of engagement Riyadh had with Washington. Of course, there was trade there as well. There was oil for weapons. The US brought arms and guns to the table, and Saudi the energy. But is this time-tested relationship relevant today? West Asia is trying to move away from war. It is signing peace accords. And the rest of the world is slowly trying to move away from oil and gas, pivoting, or at least intending to pivot towards greener energy. What Saudi Arabia needs right now is not weapons, but a partner that can help it diversify its economy. A partner with a big enough market with enterprises that Saudi Arabia can invest in. And that is where China comes into the picture. And this 3-day historic visit comes with rather loud geopolitical signaling. What we are looking at is a jam-packed agenda. Xi Jinping will be taking part in 3 summits: Saudi China, Gulf China, and the first Arab-China summit. These summits will be attended by more than 30 heads of state and leaders of international organizations. The Chinese mouthpiece Global Times is calling the Arab summit a strategic choice for both sides. And for a change, and perhaps for the first time ever, we agree with Global Times. What happens in these 3 days will lay the groundwork for a strategic partnership. One that reports say Xi Jinping will be putting his signature on before he takes off for Beijing. And where does all of this leave America? Isolated, defeated. When Joe Biden was visiting Saudi Arabia, he boasted, "We will not walk away and leave a vacuum to be filled by China." Well, China has brought to life Joe Biden's geopolitical nightmare. It has swooped in and offered the Arab world respect vis-a-vis American arrogance. While America was trying to tell the world that West Asia is no longer its priority, that it needs to focus on Europe, Asia Pacific, and not West Asia, you have the Chinese ambassador to Saudi Arabia giving interviews stating that China places relations with the kingdom as a priority. And it's a contrast that suits Saudi Arabia and its crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. Xi Jinping's historic visit to Riyadh is MBS's chance to show Joe Biden who really is in charge of bilateral ties. This is MBS telling Biden that while the US-Saudi partnership may have been in tune with the need and times of the post-war era, China and Saudi friendship makes more sense in the post-pandemic world. It's a pill too bitter for Joe Biden because it marks another geopolitical failure for his administration. As if Afghanistan was not bad enough. Now you have Saudi Arabia highlighting how Biden has been a diplomatic disaster. And you know what's worse? All of this comes at a time when oil and gas have become the most precious commodities following the war in Ukraine. If Biden wants to keep his voters happy, he needs to keep the oil prices in check. And for that, he needs Saudi Arabia and its oil cartel. But guess which side the Saudis are leaning towards? It's the Far East. If a force 4 is a perfect match, Saudi Arabia and China is a match made in heaven. And as Xi Jinping arrived in Saudi Arabia is slipping into Chinese embrace. Has America already bowed down before Saudi Arabia? Just how far is it willing to go to woo the Saudi crown prince? Let me now take you to the United States to answer that question. There has been an interesting development there. A lawsuit against MBS has been dismissed. Which lawsuit? The one filed by the fiancé of Jamal Khashoggi. The Saudi dissident who was murdered in Istanbul, his fiancé blamed the Saudi crown prince for the killing, and she took the matter to a federal court in the US, hoping that the court would do justice to her plea. And guess what? A US federal judge has thrown the lawsuit out. Why? Because of Joe Biden. Let me explain that. Last month, Joe Biden granted immunity to MBS, shielding him from any legal action. And on what grounds? On the grounds of him being the head of a state. Let me read from a court filing by the US State Department. Here's what it states. The State Department recognizes and allows the immunity of Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman as a sitting head of government of a foreign state. Prime Minister bin Salman, as a sitting head of government, is immune while in office from the jurisdiction of the United States District Court in this suit. This was last month. A month on, a U.S. federal judge has used this decision as the pretext to dismiss the lawsuit. He said he didn't want to, but he had no choice, given Joe Biden's decision. In any case, the judge has given a 25-page ruling. Let me quote the most telling excerpts. Despite the court's uneasiness then, with both the circumstances of bin Salman's appointment and the credible allegation of his involvement in Khashoggi's murder, the United States has informed the court that he is immune. In other words, what the judge meant was that his hands are tied. In fact, he even acknowledged a quote-unquote uneasiness in making the decision. Why then did he give in? Isn't it the judiciary that has the last say on important matters? Well, in the United States, not really. In his decision, the judge stressed that American law requires the judiciary to show deference to executive branch opinions on foreign immunity. Let me quote from his ruling again. The executive branch remains responsible for foreign affairs, including with Saudi Arabia, and a contrary decision on bin Salman's immunity by this court would unduly interfere with those responsibilities all the same. In other words, what the judge meant was this. The judiciary has to politely accept and respect the administration's decisions when it comes to foreign affairs. Next question. What does this ruling mean for MBS? Two things. One, it means he can now travel to the US and other jurisdictions freely. Two, his financial interests in America are no longer in jeopardy. Had the lawsuit proceeded, the case would have created a legal minefield for MBS and his business interests in America. And three, this likely marks the end of efforts to hold MBS accountable. The Biden administration's immunity will most likely protect him from any further lawsuits, at least in America. Now, I can't help but question the timing of this decision. It comes on the same day when Xi Jinping is in Riyadh. So on the face of it, this seems like an attempt by the US to stop Riyadh from drifting towards China. Remember, ties between America and Saudi Arabia are at the lowest in decades, mainly because of the Russia-Ukraine war. America wants Riyadh to ramp up oil production and help make up for the loss of Russian oil. The Saudis say this will only destabilize the markets, so the issue remains in a deadlock. Even Joe Biden's visit to Riyadh and subsequent fist bumps did not quite help. And to add to America's worries, the Chinese president is now in Riyadh. MBS has rolled out the red carpet for him. He plans to infuse the trip with a dose of spectacle and an array of extravagant expressions of friendship. America is bound to be unnerved. I am not saying this court verdict was pre-planned or preponed, but it does make one suspicious. Another thing this verdict depicts is a colossal U-turn by Joe Biden. Let me take you back to 2019 for that. This is when Joe Biden was still a candidate for the US presidency. Do you remember the promises that he made during his campaign? He had vowed to hold MBS accountable for Jamal Khashoggi's killing and turned the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia into a global pariah. Just 3 years later, the same Biden administration has granted MBS immunity. How do we perceive this? Why has Joe Biden broken his own promises? What made him grant immunity to MBS? Has America knelt a little before the Saudis? And if yes, then why? These are questions American citizens must ask their president. There is a lot happening in Iran, meanwhile. The 7th of December, the day itself is historic. It marks the killing of 3 university students by the Iranian police in the year 1953. This year, the country woke up to 5 death sentences. They were awarded to some protesters. What was their fault? Iran says these men killed Rola Ajuman. He was a member of a paramilitary force associated with Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Ajuman was reported, chased and stabbed. Hence the death sentence. But that's the regime side of the story. Critics say the death sentences are aimed at killing dissent. What Iran has seen too much of in the last few months, the protest that erupted following the killing of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in the custody of Iran's morality police, refused to die down. This fire of dissent is only spreading, in fact, to every section of the Iranian society. A very interesting letter made it to the headlines today. It was penned by a sister of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Her name is Badri Hossein Khamenei. She says, and I'm quoting, "I think it is appropriate now to declare that I oppose my brother's actions and I express my sympathy with all mothers mourning the crimes of the Islamic Republic from the time of Khamenei to the current era of the despotic caliphate of Ali Khamenei." Not just that, the sister goes on to ask Iran's Revolutionary Guards to join the people. Listen to this. Ali Khamenei's Revolutionary Guards and mercenaries should lay down their weapons as soon as possible and join the people before it is too late. And then you have a former Iranian president speaking out against the regime. This is Mohammad Khatami. He served 2 terms as president between 1997 and 2005. Khatami is now 79 years old and he believes officials need to bow down to the demands of the protesters. Khatami has urged the Iranian officials to consider the demand of the protesters before it is quote-unquote too late. And that's not all. Khatami went on to say that the protest slogan, "Woman, Life, Freedom," is beautiful. And it shows that Iran is moving towards a better future. Now, all of this coming on the final day of a 3-day general strike called by the protesters. Earlier today, students gathered at Tehran's Amir Kabir University. It was a show of solidarity. The students waved flags, shouted anti-regime slogans. "Don't be afraid. We are all together," they said. Many also chanted, "Down with the whole regime." Many were seen blocking the roads and setting objects on fire. Many others were supposed to join the anti-regime protest today, but some 1,200 university students fell sick. Students of at least 2 Iranian universities had common symptoms: vomiting, severe body ache, hallucinations. What happened? Iranian officials say the students were infected by a waterborne bacteria. The students say it's sabotage. They believe the regime poisoned the university students to keep them away from the protests. So was this really a case of sabotage? In Iran, only one person gets to answer that, and that is the regime's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. And he has spoken. In fact, Khamenei has called for an overhaul of Iran's cultural system. Khamenei had a meeting with the State Cultural Council where he said, and I'm quoting, "It is necessary to revolutionize the country's cultural structure. The Supreme Council should observe the weaknesses of culture in different fields of the country." What exactly did he mean? What message was the Ayatollah sending to the people of Iran? No one really knows. It's as vague as it gets. Unlike the protesters who seem to have clarity about what they want, and that is a change in the status quo. And staying with Iran, as anti-hijab protests rage on, the country has taken a very consequential decision. And no, this decision does not concern Iranian citizens. It concerns India. According to reports, Iran is no longer importing tea and basmati rice from India. That's right. Since last week, Iran has stopped signing all contracts for tea and basmati rice imports. It doesn't plan on buying them anytime soon. But the question is why? The answer is uncertain. No one knows the reason behind Iran's move, but a lot of speculation is doing the rounds. For starters, exporters believe this decision could have stemmed from the ongoing protests in the country. They have shut shops, hotels and markets across Iran. It's been over 2 months. There are no signs of stability. So is this the reason behind Iran's move? Who knows? Some other observers believe this decision could have been taken due to a rupee trade settlement agreement, which India and Iran are currently working on. Look at the headline now coming up on your screen. New Delhi and Tehran are surveying the possibilities of settling trade transactions in rupee or through a barter system. So is this the reason behind Iran's move? Again, who knows? Now, some of you may be wondering, is this really that big a deal? And the answer is yes. Look at the numbers. Iran imports around 30 to 35 million kgs of orthodox tea from India and about 1.5 million kgs basmati rice from India every year. And if we speak of India, Iran happens to be its second biggest destination for basmati rice imports. It accounts for a total of 16%. Saudi Arabia comes first with 22% of basmati rice exports going there. And these are big numbers. They help you grasp the gravity of Iran's decision. The question is, can Iran do without Indian imports, especially basmati rice, which happens to be the staple food for many Iranians? To start with, the famous adave polo or pulao is made using basmati rice that comes from India. The chelo kebab is made using basmati rice, as is the yogurt and saffron tadig. My point is simple. The basmati rice is an essential ingredient in a host of Persian dishes. We wonder how Iranians will do without it. Now, here's the thing. For India, the impact of Iran's decision may be minimal. Its exports of tea and rice have risen in recent times amid growing shortages in other countries, and this is mainly because of the Russia-Ukraine war. In fact, during the first 8 months of this year, exports of tea from India increased by 14.8%. 14.8%. They stood at a whopping 140.28 million kilograms. The same time last year, the shipment stood at 122.18 million kilograms. So Iran's decision may not have had much of an impact on India. Next question. Has India said anything about Iran's move? Not really. Besides statements from traders and businessmen, no official remarks have been made by New Delhi. In fact, India is busy taking other decisions. Decisions like these. Stalling the exports of Chinese phones. According to reports, India has stalled the exports of 27,000 Vivo phones worth over $15 million. What this basically means is that Vivo smartphones manufactured in India are no longer being exported to other countries. The report says that for more than a week, Vivo phones are being held up at the New Delhi airport by authorities. Which authorities are these? The Revenue Intelligence Unit, a branch of India's finance ministry. Reports say it has held up the smartphones over an alleged misdeclaration of the device models and their value. In other words, Vivo did not provide the right information about the kind of devices that it was exporting and at what price. Now, remember, this move is part of a series of Indian economic pushbacks against China, especially Vivo. In July this year, the Enforcement Directorate of India launched a crackdown against Vivo. The charges against Vivo were striking. It was accused of channeling money out of India. Why is that? So that it could show losses and avoid paying taxes. Do you know how much money it had laundered? Approximately 624 billion rupees. That's equal to $7.9 billion. This is almost half of Vivo's total sales revenue in India. And what's the total? About 1.25 trillion rupees since 2014. That's what Vivo has earned in India. This was in July. 4 months on, India has stalled Vivo exports. This comes at the same time when Iran has stopped basmati rice exports from India. How do we perceive this? Is there a trade war brewing? Are South Asian nations becoming more and more insular? Why is there a heightened scrutiny of imports and exports? Here's hoping we find the answers in the days ahead. Let me now tell you about a story coming in from Australia that has been making headlines. It's about Uber, the ride-sharing giant. If you use cab apps, you would be aware of the concept of cancellation fees. You know, when you book a cab and then have to cancel the ride for some reason and then have to pay a fee for the cancellation. Now, an Australian court has fined Uber $14 million. Why? For threatening cancellation fees it never charged and overstating fare estimates on some rides, basically breaking the consumer law. How exactly? The federal court ruled that the Australian arm of the US ride-sharing app misled customers with warnings that they would be charged for cancelling some rides from 2017 to 2021 and by using an inaccurate software algorithm to estimate the fares for a taxi service that it offered until August 2020. First, let me tell you what a cancellation charge is all about. After an Uber driver accepts a trip, Uber has a 5-minute window. During these 5 minutes, the passenger can cancel the trip without incurring any extra charges. But between December 2017 and September 2021, Uber misled users through its cancellation message. The message read, "You may be charged a small fee since your driver is already on their way." This was then changed to say, "You will not be charged a cancellation fee." Let me now tell you what the judge said in the case. In a written ruling, Judge Michael Hugo Bryan said that by supplying inaccurate information on its smartphone app, Uber would be expected to lead a proportion of consumers to alter their decision and not proceed with the cancellation and perhaps deter future cancellations while distorting demand for its service. The judge said the Uber taxi algorithm overshot the fare estimate 89% of the time, but less than 1% of the total Uber rides used that service. 89% of the time. Meanwhile, Uber, in a post on its website, had said that it apologized to Australians for the mistakes made and it has since proactively made changes to the platform based on the concerns that were raised. Uber will have to implement a compliance program and it will have to not communicate anything misleading about cancellation fees for 3 years. Now, this case is about more than just a fine. It is about misleading consumers. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, or ACC chair, Gina Cascodleb, said that the fine clearly signals to businesses that misleading consumers about the cost of a product or service is a serious matter which can attract substantial penalties. And this has been a pretty bad week for Uber. It has already agreed to a $10 million settlement with the city of Chicago. What is that about? For listing local restaurants in the Uber Eats and Postmates food delivery apps without the consent of the restaurants, and also for charging excess commission fees. $5 million will go towards paying damages back to Chicago restaurants that were affected. And this brings me to the bigger issue about the trust that one places in the applications that we rely on today, and what happens when that trust is violated. Cases like these bring to light how holding companies accountable becomes necessary. It is said that the best fine is the one not imposed, basically a situation where a company does not have to be asked to follow fair practices. Trust is a precious commodity. More so for a business that relies on that trust to keep its customers going the extra mile to keep that trust is more important today than ever. Shifting focus, Christmas lights are up, the mercury is down, winter coats and boots are out, and so are the handkerchiefs. It is officially that time of the year when you can hear every other person coughing, sneezing. But why does this happen? Aren't pesky cold and flu germs whirling around in the air through the year? So why are cold and flu particularly common during the winter months? Our next report gets you the answer. Take a look.
Why are respiratory illnesses more common in winter? A new study may have found the reason. Researchers are calling it a scientific breakthrough. It turns out the cold air damages the immune response in the nose. Did you know a temperature reduction in our nose by just 5 degrees Celsius can have a drastic impact? According to the new study, this can kill nearly half of the billions of virus and bacteria fighting cells in our nostrils. Let's break it down further for you. Cold air is associated with increased viral infection because you lose half your immunity just by a small drop in temperature. To understand why this happens, scientists dug deeper, and this is what they found out. When a respiratory virus or bacteria invaded the nose at regular temperatures, the front part of the nose detected the germ first. This happens well before the back of the nose is aware of the intruder. At that point, cells lining the nose begin replicating themselves into billions. They are released via mucus to stop the germ invasion. The production of virus-fighting cells in our noses is increased by 160%. This gives our body the upper hand against flu virus and bacteria. But what happens to those advantages when the cold weather hits? Dipping temperature cuts your immune system's ability to fight off respiratory infections by half, as the germ-fighting cells are significantly reduced due to cold air. However, the COVID-19 pandemic had a silver lining. It gave us exactly what we needed to help fight off chilly air and maintain solid immunity. When everyone started wearing masks to stay safe from the virus, they also accidentally started keeping their noses warmer. And the warmer you can keep the intranasal environment, the better your innate defense mechanism will work. Wearing masks is more beneficial than you thought. It maintains the optimum temperature inside your nose and lets immune cells thrive. So you might want to stick to your mask this flu season.
You remember when Anil Kumble was sacked as the head coach of Indian cricket? Several reports cited differences between Virat Kohli and Anil Kumble as the primary reason behind his resignation. The captain and head coach were reportedly not on the same page, and Kumble had to pay the price with his job. But now the tables have turned, and what happened in Portugal versus Switzerland World Cup match in Qatar is major proof. Cristiano Ronaldo, the biggest football superstar of the time, was benched. The entire stadium was taken aback. Spectators chanted Ronaldo's name during the match, and after a point, even booed at the coach, Fernando Santos. But Santos kept the reins in his hand. He gave Ronaldo's position in the starting lineup to Gonçalo Ramos. Ramos had big shoes to fill, but he understood the assignment. The 21-year-old went on to score a hat-trick in his first international start. Portugal scored a major victory, in fact, the best one in this World Cup so far. The team thrashed Switzerland by 6-1 to set up a quarter-final with Morocco, and all of this without its star player Ronaldo. So where does this leave Ronaldo? And more importantly, Ronaldo's relationship with the coach, Fernando Santos. The last few months have been rather tough for the football star. From being the most desirable player, Ronaldo has become a star no one wants anymore. He recently lost his position with Manchester United following his bitter remarks on television. He also had a fair share of problems with the team manager, Erik ten Hag. But Manchester United seems to be doing just fine without him. In the Premier League this season, United won 70% of the games when Ronaldo was not in the starting lineup, opposed to merely 25% when he was. So was Erik ten Hag wrong to start the matches without Ronaldo? Wasn't it a better choice for the team? Another big example of coaches taking the center stage is the new Moroccan coach. Walid Regragui was not welcomed wholeheartedly by the critics. They belittled him and called him Mr. Avocado Head. He also did not hesitate from giving a good comeback. He teased his haters by holding an avocado and pointing to his head in a picture. And now avocado might become the country's favorite fruit, as the coach made Morocco the first Arab nation to reach the World Cup quarterfinals. He proved that his coaching skills are just as good as his sense of humor. He turned around the entire team. The Moroccans stunned the second-ranked Belgians 2-0. And this brings me to our bigger question. Is this the start of a new era in sports? Is the age of coaches finally here? Because coaches are no longer in the awe of star players like Ronaldo. Instead, they are being proactive. They are no longer afraid of hurting the egos of superstars. Rather, they are taking decisions in the interest of the team. Shifting focus, 13 years after James Cameron released the highest-grossing film of all time, Avatar, the filmmaker premiered its long-awaited sequel in London. Titled Avatar, The Way of Water, the movie takes the audiences back to the enchanting world of Pandora. More about the premiere in our next report.
Why do you come to us?
People are coming back. The theaters are full again. We're sold out, for the first few weeks. So yeah, it feels good. Feels like a resurgence.
Look, this is a heart-wrenching story. It's mighty, it's very powerful. You hope that it connects, but it's not just a carbon copy of the first one. We really expanded the world, we really expanded this family unit, and hopefully that expands the emotions and resonates with an audience.
It was emotional, actually. That's a good word to use. It was exciting. It was also very scary because obviously Jim had, raised the stakes for himself. That meant that everybody, was going to have a brand new challenge to have to deal with.
Protect the people. Let's get it done.
Time now to take a quick look at what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
An Afghan man convicted of murder is executed in public, say the Taliban, the first confirmation of such a sentence since the hardline Islamists returned to power. India's central bank hikes the repo rate by 35 basis points, the fifth hike in a row, as the bank says its battle against high inflation is not yet over. At least 2 people are killed and many others injured in a suspected suicide bombing at a police station in West Java. Police coordinating with the counter-terrorism unit to investigate the blast. German police arrest 25 members of far-right terror group suspected of planning an attack on parliament. Arrests made after nationwide raids. US to increase gas exports to Britain next year, easing its close allies' reliance on Russian energy. Washington seeks to export at least 10 billion cubic meters of liquefied natural gas via UK terminals. Environmental activists hurl paint at the entrance of Milan's prestigious La Scala Opera House, part of a series of recent protests across Europe to focus attention on climate change. The UN humanitarian coordinator for Somalia warned that the country was undergoing a catastrophic emergency due to the most severe drought in the nation's history. An oil spill has polluted more than 4 kilometers of coastline in the city of Lecheria, one of Venezuela's top tourist destinations. The mayor has ordered the beaches to be closed for at least 72 hours. 21-year-old forward Gonzalo Ramos, who replaced 5-time World Player of the Year Cristiano Ronaldo in the Portugal team, marked his full debut with a hat-trick as Portugal beat Switzerland 6-1 to reach the quarter-finals of the 2022 Qatar World Cup. This was also the first treble of the World Cup. Belgium captain Eden Hazard has announced retirement from international football after his team's World Cup campaign ended in the group stage. The 31-year-old, who made his debut back in 2008, retires, having scored 33 goals in 126 appearances for the Red Devils.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.
Em casa só como de colher, né? Ah, não consigo, né?